All right, let's dive deep into this book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck by Mark Manson.
Oh, yeah, this one's a good one.
It is, right? The title's a bit provocative, but the message, I think, is really powerful.
Definitely.
So Mark Manson, he kind of turns this whole idea of, always be positive, always strive for more. He kind of flips that on its head.
He does. He really challenges the whole, um, that kind of classic self-help narrative.
Exactly. Yeah. Like we're always told, like, be happy, be successful. But Manson's like, hold on a second. You don't have to care about everything.
Yeah, and that's so freeing, isn't it?
It is. It is. And that's what I love about this book. It's like he gives you permission to just let go of all those things that are weighing you down, all those expectations. Like
hmm
you don't have to be extraordinary in every single area of your life to be happy?
Exactly. In fact, he even argues that happiness isn't about avoiding problems altogether.
Yeah, that really surprised me. He's like, happiness comes from solving problems. And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
It sounds counterintuitive,
Right.
but it makes so much sense when you think about it.
It does, yeah. Like, think back to some of the toughest challenges you've faced in your own life.
Yeah.
You probably learned some valuable lessons from those experiences, right?
Absolutely. And you grew as a person.
Exactly. So those struggles, those were actually opportunities for growth in disguise.
They were.
Mm.
And that's what Manson is getting at. He's not saying you should go out and create unnecessary drama in your life.
No, no, not at all.
It's about choosing the right problems to solve,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that are actually going to push you to become a better version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the whole not giving a feck comes in.
Hmm.
It's not about being apathetic or careless.
Right.
It's about being selective with your energy, choosing what you care about and what you're willing to fight for.
Exactly. It's about saying, you know what? I'm not going to waste my time and energy on things that don't really matter to me.
Right. Like, what are some things you feel pressured to care about that you could maybe, just maybe, start giving a little less of a feck about?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, it's definitely those little things like, what people think of me on social media or whether I'm keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Those external expectations can be so draining, right?
They really can be. And Manson encourages you to really examine the values that are driving your choices. Like, are you pursuing things because you genuinely value them or because you think you should?
That's so important because if you're not living in alignment with your values, you're going to feel unfulfilled no matter how successful you might appear on the outside.
Absolutely. It's about defining success on your own terms. And speaking of success, Manson uses a really interesting example in the first chapter, Don't Try.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about Charles Bukowski, the writer.
Oh, yeah, Bukowski. He's known for his kind of gritty, realistic style, right?
He is, and he was a very successful writer. But what's fascinating is that he didn't try to be anyone other than himself. He embraced his ordinariness, his flaws, and that authenticity is what made his writing so compelling.
That's such a powerful message. Like, you don't have to be the next Elon Musk or Beyonce to live a meaningful life. In fact, trying to be someone you're not can actually be a recipe for unhappiness.
Right, it is.
So it's more about focusing on what you're genuinely good at, what makes you tick.
Exactly. And that's where the whole idea of choosing what to care about comes into play. If you're constantly trying to meet someone else's expectations, you're never going to be truly happy.
Yeah, it's like you're always chasing this external validation instead of looking inward and finding fulfillment from within.
Right. And this leads us perfectly into chapter 2. Happiness is a problem.
Okay, so he's saying happiness isn't about avoiding problems. I gotta admit, I'm intrigued.
I know, right? It's like what? But his point is that true happiness actually stems from solving problems.
So it's not about eliminating all problems. It's about choosing the right problems to solve.
Exactly. The ones that align with your values, that push you to grow.
I love that. It's like reframing those challenges as opportunities for growth rather than just obstacles to overcome.
It is. And he uses a really interesting example to illustrate this point. He talks about Buddha.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so Buddha, he left a life of luxury, palaces and all that, to confront the realities of human suffering head on.
He did. Wow.
And it was through that struggle, through facing those difficult truths, that he ultimately found enlightenment.
So it's like those challenges, those problems, they were actually catalysts for growth and self-discovery.
Exactly. And I'm not saying we all need to become monks and renounce all our worldly possessions, but the underlying message is that real growth often comes from facing those difficult truths and working through them.
Yeah, it's like working a muscle. The more you challenge it, the stronger it becomes.
Exactly.
Huh.
And this leads us to chapter 3, You Are Not Special.
Okay, that sounds a little harsh, but I'm listening.
I know, right? But he's not saying you have no value or worth. He's pushing back against this modern obsession with feeling special.
Yeah, like we're constantly bombarded with messages about being extraordinary and following our passions.
Exactly. And all that pressure to be exceptional, it can actually backfire and make us feel inadequate and anxious.
Yeah, because you're always comparing yourself to others and you're always going to come up short.
You are. And that's why Manson says it's okay to be average.
Okay, be average. Got it.
It's okay to have strengths and weaknesses. And in fact, focusing on personal growth, becoming the best version of yourself, is far more fulfilling than chasing that external validation.
Yeah, there's something freeing about that, right?
There is. Like, it takes the pressure off. And it allows you to focus on what you can control, your own progress and your own growth, rather than comparing yourself to others.
Totally. It's like shifting your focus from, am I good enough, to, am I becoming a better version of myself?
Right. Exactly. And this ties into this whole idea of choosing your values, which Manson delves into in Chapter 4, the value of suffering.
Okay, the value of suffering, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, he uses this really interesting analogy called the self-awareness onion. So imagine an onion with layers.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
All right, good. Each layer represents a level of self-awareness. So the outer layers, those are like the superficial things, your job, your possessions, your social status.
Got it.
But as you peel back those layers, you get to the core, the deeper truths about yourself.
So it's about confronting those uncomfortable truths about yourself.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging your flaws, your insecurities, and your fears. And it can be painful, like peeling an onion.
I can't imagine, yeah.
But it's through that process that you uncover your true values, the guiding principles that are going to lead to a more fulfilling life.
That's deep. I love it.
It is. It's about getting real with yourself. And this is where it gets really interesting. Manson argues that you need to choose the right values. Like, he contrasts shitty values, like the pursuit of wealth and fame, with more meaningful values, like honesty, integrity, and contribution.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, are your values based on external validation or what genuinely brings you satisfaction?
Exactly. And that's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've talked about choosing what to care about, finding happiness and solving problems, embracing being average, uncovering our true values. This is a lot to unpack.
I know, right? But it's all connected, you know?
It is. And it all comes back to this idea of living a more intentional life, choosing what you give a feck about and what you let go of.
Exactly. And that's what makes this book so powerful. It's not just about feeling good. It's about living a more meaningful life.
I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
so where do we go from here? What's coming up in the next part of our deep dive?
Well, in the next part, we're going to delve into the power of personal responsibility. It's about taking ownership of your life, even when things happen that are outside of your control.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
All right, well, Manson introduces this concept called the responsibility fault fallacy. It's this idea that even if you're not at fault for a situation, you're still responsible for how you choose to respond to it.
Ooh, okay, that's interesting. So it's about not letting circumstances dictate your happiness.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that you always have a choice, even in the face of adversity.
I love that. Okay, so we've got a lot more to explore in the next part of our deep dive. But before we go, I want to encourage everyone listening to really think about those guiding principles in their own life. Like, what are those values that drive your choices? And are you living in alignment with them?
That's such a good question to ponder.
It is, right? Okay, well, we'll see you back here for part 2, where we'll continue our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a fuck.
It's going to be good. Welcome back to our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck.
Okay, so last time we were talking about, like, choosing your values and kind of getting to the core of who you are, right?
We were. And now we're going to get into some really practical stuff.
Yes. Let's talk about how to actually, like, apply these ideas in our everyday lives.
Okay, so one of the things Manson talks about is the importance of embracing uncertainty.
Uncertainty. Okay, that doesn't sound very comforting.
I know, right? But hear me out. In Chapter 6, you're wrong about everything, but so am I. He actually encourages you to cultivate self-doubt.
Self-doubt. Wait, isn't this supposed to be a self-help book?
It is.
Yeah.
But Manson's approach is a little different. He's saying that clinging to those rigid beliefs, like assuming you have all the answers, can actually hold you back.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. If you're not open to being wrong, how can you learn and grow?
Exactly. And that's why he emphasizes the importance of humility, recognizing that you don't have all the answers, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Right. It's like that saying, The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing.
I love that. So how do we actually cultivate this self-doubt? Like, do we just go around second-guessing everything?
Not exactly. It's more about being open to different perspectives, questioning your assumptions. Like, what's a belief you hold dear that maybe you could benefit from examining a little more critically?
Hmm, that's a good question. I'll have to think about that one. You know, it's funny though, this whole idea of embracing uncertainty, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier about choosing the right problems to solve.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're constantly afraid of being wrong, of making mistakes, you might avoid challenges altogether, right?
Exactly. But if you can reframe uncertainty as an opportunity for growth, well, then you're more likely to take those risks and push yourself outside of your comfort zone.
That's a brilliant insight. And it leads us perfectly into chapter 7. Failure is the way forward.
Okay, failure is the way forward. I like that.
Yeah, so here, Manson really drives home this point, that failure is not the opposite of success. It's an integral part of it.
I think a lot of us struggle with that. Like we're so afraid of failing that we don't even try.
We do, but the truth is, failure is inevitable. It's going to happen no matter how hard we try to avoid it.
It will, so why not just reframe it as a learning opportunity, right?
Exactly. And that's what Manson encourages you to do, to see failure not as a setback, but as a stepping stone toward growth.
I love that. So how do we actually do that? Like how do we shift our perspective on failure?
Well, Manson has this principle he calls do something.
Do something. Okay, I like it already.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, but it's so powerful. It's the idea that taking action, even if it's imperfect, is better than staying stuck in what he calls analysis paralysis.
Oh yeah, analysis paralysis. I know that feeling well. Like you overthink and overplan and you never actually do anything.
Exactly. And so he's saying just start, do something, anything,
Mm.
even if it's small.
Yeah, because often that initial action is all it takes to break through that inertia, right?
Absolutely. And then once you get going, it becomes easier to keep going.
Yeah, you build momentum. Okay, so do something. Got it. I'm gonna write that on a sticky note and put it on my computer.
Uh-huh. I love it. Okay, now, this idea of taking action and setting boundaries, that leads us nicely into chapter 8, the importance of saying no.
Oh, yes. The importance of saying no. This is such a big one for me. I used to be like a chronic people pleaser, saying yes to everything and everyone, and it was exhausting.
It is. But Manson argues that saying no is not selfish. It's actually an act of self-care.
I love that. It's about setting those boundaries and protecting your time and energy.
Exactly. By declining requests that don't align with your values or your goals, you create space for the things that really matter.
So true. What are some things you could maybe start saying no to, to make more room for what brings you joy?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm definitely going to have to think about that. What's interesting is that this whole idea of saying no also ties back to the concept of choosing your battles, right?
Totally. It's all about being intentional with your energy and your time, not spreading yourself too thin, but focusing on the things that really matter.
Exactly. And that's what ultimately leads to a more fulfilling life, isn't it?
It is. And you know what? This whole conversation has me thinking about something.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we've been talking about all these different ideas, embracing uncertainty, reframing failure, saying no. But it all seems to come back to this one central theme.
And what's that?
It's about taking control of your life, making conscious choices about what you give your energy to, what you value, and how you spend your time.
Absolutely. It's about being the author of your own story, not just a passive character in someone else's narrative.
I love that. Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here in part 2. What can we expect in the final part of our deep dive?
In the final part, we're going to tackle perhaps the most thought-provoking chapter of them all. And then you die. We'll explore how embracing our mortality can actually help us live more fully. It's going to be powerful.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck, and I have to say I'm a little nervous about this one.
Oh, why is that?
Well, because we're about to talk about death.
Ah, yes, chapter 9, and then you die.
Yeah, and honestly, thinking about my own mortality isn't exactly my idea of a good time.
I get it, but trust me, this chapter's anything but morbid.
Okay, well, I'm trying to keep an open mind.
Good, because Manson's approach to this topic is actually quite refreshing.
So he's not like doom and gloom, you're gonna die, so why bother doing anything?
No, not at all. In fact, he uses that awareness of your limited time as a tool for living a more meaningful life.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like, if you knew you only had a year left to live, how would you spend your time?
Wow, that's a really good question.
Right. It really puts things into perspective.
It does. Like suddenly all those petty worries and anxieties seem to just fade away.
Exactly. And what you're left with are the things that truly matter.
Your relationships, your values, the impact you want to make on the world.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So it's not about dwelling on death or letting fear paralyze you.
right.
It's about using that awareness to prioritize what's truly important.
It's almost like death becomes this clarifying force.
It does. It helps you separate the wheat from the chaff.
So Manson's basically saying, don't waste your precious time on things that don't align with your value.
Exactly. Don't waste it on things that don't bring you joy.
And this idea actually ties back to everything we've been talking about.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Choosing your battles, taking responsibility, embracing uncertainty, it all becomes more urgent when you acknowledge that your time is limited.
It does.
Yeah.
So how do you think this awareness of death can influence the choices you make in your everyday life?
Well, I think it encourages me to really savor each moment,
Mm-hmm.
to nurture those relationships that are important to me,
Yeah.
and to really go after those things that I'm passionate about.
I love that.
Because you realize that every day is a gift and you don't want to waste it.
That's beautifully said. And that's really the heart of what Manson is trying to convey.
So it's not about being reckless or nihilistic.
Nope.
It's about choosing to live a life that is true to yourself, a life filled with meaning and purpose.
Yes. Even in the face of your own mortality.
Wow, this has been such an incredible conversation.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from choosing our battles to embracing our mortality.
And it's all connected.
It is. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a feck, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I would say the most important message is that you have the power to choose what you care about, what you value, and how you spend your precious time. Don't let society dictate your values or your definition of success. Choose your battles wisely, embrace your imperfections, and live a life that is authentically yours.
That's such a powerful reminder. And it's funny, this whole idea of not giving a feck actually leads to a life where you care more deeply about the things that truly matter.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
It is. By letting go of the things that don't serve you, you create space for the things that do.
Exactly. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope it was as thought-provoking for you as it was for us.
Yes. Thank you all for listening.
And remember, the real work starts now, taking these insights and applying them to your own life.
That's right.
So go out there and start not giving a feck about the things that don't matter.
And start embracing the things that do.
Until next time, happy deep diving.